First of all, thank you all for joining us tonight. This may not be a very long meeting, but I'm hoping it'll be informational. And we're looking to get some feedback from you guys, so anything is welcome. But tonight, well, so I guess before I get going here, I'll do the attendance. So we've got Bill Wargo, Holly Reese, Catherine Boyk, Larry Kupferman, Linda Bailey, Lisa Yankowski, and Stephen Camo. Is that right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into my presentation. So I'll probably do is turn my camera off just so I don't have any weird hiccups. Let me know if at any time you have any issues viewing my presentation. Oh, well, I didn't want to do that. Okay. All righty. So we are here to talk about the Red Rocks Park Management Plan update. Just a quick overview of the agenda for tonight. We're going to be talking a little bit about why we wanted to update the existing plan, review some of the important updates that you can find in the draft document, and have a little discussion period with hoping to answer any questions that there might be and take any feedback from either committee or any member of the public that might be with us tonight. And then we'll also share what the next steps kind of look like for getting this thing adopted. I also want to take a moment and just thank, we had a great project team. It was our first attempt at a natural areas management plan task force to tackle the any management plan associated with any of the city's natural areas. We had members of city staff, representatives from the Recreation and Parks and Natural Resources and Conservation Committee, and we invited some state experts in natural resources and to also help us out. The goal of this group, as I said, was to create and update management plans to ensure long-term sustainability of any natural area property purchased by the city. And priorities include natural resource conservation, best management practices, and preservation for public use. We also recognize the importance of having a management plan that considers internal capacity to fulfill management plan expectations and also meet the needs of the community while ensuring the longevity of our protected natural area lands. This PowerPoint also provides you with links to where you can find the documents associated with the update. There are two documents because they're really large. So you'll have, one of them is it's the main body, the main contents of the update, and the second one is the list of appendices and the actual documents associated with the appendices. So why update the old plan? So since the original management plan was adopted in 2014, staff have really realized that we needed to have a document that also addressed the changes in park usage that we're seeing, as well as maintenance needs and staff capacity and resources. All these things have changed since 2014, and even really since the pandemic took off. So we realized it was a time to take another look and just to make sure that we had everything that we needed to consider considered. We also, the original plan also called for a 5-year revision period. So it was, I think, 2019 when we took it on, and so it was about 5 years right after, and it took us a few years to get it, get to this point. And also, it's the realization that when you're looking at a natural area, management of that natural area is always evolving. And as even the original management plan states, you have to, adapt your management strategies and practices to fit with the landscape and any changes that come with it. We also wanted to create a tiers of management so that we had options for staff to implement depending on resources available that fiscal year. So that was something that we didn't have the flexibility with in the first management plan, and we wanted to be able to provide something to connect that to in this update. So some of the new material that you'll see in the plan, these are just some bullets of things that I called out for you, but we did a public outreach summary. We assessed each individual management priority that was originally identified in the first management plan. We identified management strategies with some estimated costs for the natural communities that are found within the park, which hadn't been done before. We recommended 10-year management actions for each management priority. So giving us a goal for 10 years, you know, what to do and how to do it in 10 years. We updated the maintenance activity timeline, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And we also updated partnership opportunities because as time has changed, partners that had done certain tasks over, you know, previously are some are no longer doing those and some are doing different things. So we wanted to try to provide an updated list of partners. And then we also did try to include any new maps and documents that would be useful for any city staff person who was tasked with managing this property in the future. So the next couple of slides go into the public outreach that we did. And I think just to start off, it's worth noting that we understand that the survey that we did really wasn't as inclusive as I think we had hoped it would be. There's definitely work to do in the future to get more data to work with as we work to evaluate our management and park use. But I think it was a great place to start, and it gave us, you know, some pointers as far as what users experience, what they're interested in, and as well as some other things. So we'll just kind of go through a few of these points. Just to give you a sense of what we did, we released the survey in 2019. It was open for about a year. We left it open a little bit longer when the pandemic hit, just to kind of gather more info as people were using the park a little bit more. It was available online, and we shared it via the city website and newsletters, Front Porch Forum. It was sent to all committees and council. We even had an amazing volunteer, Lisa, thank you, for distributing paper copies to folks who were visiting, and also, you know, distributing to folks who were we did some community hikes, and we're able to reach some folks that way as well. So in total, we received about 129 responses through all of that connection. And as I noted before, one of the recommendations from this outreach summary was to conduct additional surveys to gather more data and to continue to track trends and monitor these changes to management needs. So that is something that came out of doing this initial work. Now, as you see in my graph here, the visitation is, you know, fairly high, with the highest number of visits being 1 or more days a week. So I think that gives you a sense, 1 or more days a week and then 1 or more times a month. So the park receives fairly high usage during the week alone. The key survey takeaways really were, here's some main bullet points. We had about 77% of respondents talk about natural area conservation being valued more than recreation. The visits to the park, as I said, are very high. And as we noticed and just observed observations of how the use changed during the pandemic, that use just increased even more. So I think if we were to do counts, probably even today, we would see that these numbers are probably even higher. 74% of the respondents from this survey were from South Burlington. We did target probably more South Burlington survey takers than outside, although we are aware that we do have a lot of out-of-city visitors. So something to consider for future surveys is to make sure that we're really gathering data to see, you know, from all folks who are using the park, to get a sense of where folks are coming from in terms of messaging and, you know, sharing information with even other municipalities in terms of messaging about our parks and use of parks. Favorite park uses, hiking, not surprising, was the highest, with dog walking and swimming and meditation following that. The top 3 management needs from folks using the park was trail maintenance, erosion control, and invasive plant removal. And just worth noting, we did receive at least 10 comments related to off-leash dogs and dog waste in the park. And so that is something, I think, moving forward, that was another thing that we took away from this, was to try to gather more information and data on users' thoughts about dogs in the park. So next up, we did evaluate our management priorities. And in the original management plan, these bullets here were all priorities that were identified in the original management plan. So they include natural communities, physical resources, trails, forest health and wildlife management, invasive plants, off-leash dogs, beach management, parking and traffic management, recreation and education, Champlain Water District easement, the signage, wayfinding and park information, and funding. We took a deeper dive into the management of the natural communities that you'll find at the park, because we do have many sensitive and rare natural communities found at Red Rocks that you really don't find at many places throughout the state. So what we really worked on here was incorporating what was already in the 2013 Natural Resource Assessment, which was done before the management plan, but then also recommend more current assessments to reflect existing conditions. So taking a look at the park now, today, and how it's changed since 2014, and noting things that, as how use has affected it and how what management actions have been taking place to date. One of the valuable resources that I think it was helpful to us as we walked through this plan and updated it was this Wetland, Woodland, Wildland, a guide to the natural communities of Vermont. It was a really helpful resource. I recommend it to anybody who's interested in learning more about natural communities and how they are cared for in the state. Essentially, every natural community could really dictate different management strategies, but I think what we're going for here is, at the end of the day, going for a park-wide, identifying those spots that may be more sensitive and needing, possibly no management or a lighter touch versus an area that maybe has a ton of invasives and might need a little extra love. So this is where you'll see our attempt at enacting a tiered management approach, with the first tier being a strategy that would require the greatest amount of city resources, so staff and financial, and then tier 3 being a strategy that would require the least amount of resources. And so I have on this slide an example of one of those tiers that you'll see in the plan for just one. I guess this one is for the Hemlock White Pine Northern Hardwood Forest community in the park. We also provide some management notes for each community as well as management recommendations. I mentioned earlier that we have updated the maintenance activity timeline, which I think is really exciting. So the current management plan identified all of the activities or tasks really that could occur seasonally in the park in terms of its management. And in the original plan, the assumption was that all these tasks were completed by city staff. And there was also no funding directly attached to any proposed task or inclusion of tasks staff do annually. So what we did with the maintenance activity timeline was we updated it to include a column where it assigns tasks to an entity. And we didn't address the funding issue here, but it provides partnership opportunities that can allow for the flexibility of using whatever resources city staff have available in a fiscal year. And it might be something to look at down the road to actually tie a direct dollar amount to each task so we can budget for that in the next fiscal year. So one of the recommendations that came out of redoing this timeline was just evaluate it regularly to determine which tasks are a priority. So that could depend on what uses are increased that season, or what, if an invasive plant is really taking off, maybe you focus on invasive management that year. Or if we've got a ton of erosion happening on a trail, maybe that becomes a priority. So it's just assessing what's a priority. And then the goal here too, we wanted to note that we should implement a monitoring checklist to complete after a site visit. So we want to do more monitoring of the park to better track and assess what is going on in the park and what needs our management, more management. And I do have in the management plan an example of what a monitoring checklist or report could look like. So that is my really lengthy, PowerPoint. I am happy to take questions now. I guess what I could do too is the next slide just highlights what our next steps are for this management plan update. So, based on what feedback we get tonight, what I'd like to do is, incorporate any recommendations and finalize this plan. and hopefully get the support of the Recreation and Parks and Natural Resources and Conservation Committees to support the Recreation Director's adoption of this plan. And then once this plan is adopted, updating the City Council and letting them know that this has happened, that we have completed the first project of our task force. The next step after that would be to kick off work on the Wheeler Nature Park Management Plan, which will be connected with the hoped for conservation easement at Wheeler, which is in the works. So that is the goal. I'm gonna do, and Drew just told me he likes a photo. Yes, thank you. Drew is one of our weed warriors. And that was, I believe Avery is in that photo as well. She's one of our youngest weed warriors.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I would like to open the floor for questions if folks have any, or comments, feedback. Larry, yes.
Oh, just thanks for this, Ashley. And I think making mention of the great signage that's been installed recently is a big improvement to how to get around the park. I think that's been really helpful. I just wanted to point out, and I have to ask our water operators, but our part of Red Rocks Park is actually in the water, the source protection area for the neighborhood water system. And it should probably be mentioned in the management report as something to watch out for in that list of details that you offered.
So what is it actually called, Larry?
It's the source protection area. It's 1,000 feet around the wellhead.
Okay.
And since the pump lot is right on the boundary with the exit roadway, 1,000 feet extends into mostly the parking areas. But I think it should be noted in this report that it exists, and there's a water source, and I can get the details from water operators.
Yeah, that would be helpful. And even if there's a map that goes with that, I could include that just to show future managers, where that is.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'll do that.
That's a good point. There usually is a annual call out, Larry, from, I want to say his name is Andrew, but I could have that name wrong.
Andy and Steve are the water operators, and right. And I know they're both quite aware of any what's the word, activities, but it should be at least part of the plan. Should be a mention of it and a reference.
Good point.
Thanks, Ashley.
Mm-hmm. Catherine, I see your mic is on. Do you want to make a comment? It's okay if you don't.
Sure. I like the 3-tier approaches that you took. I imagine that you guys, like as city employees, will find that useful. Do you have a sense of, like, in an average year, what sort of funding you'd have, whether you'd be choosing like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3?
I can jump in and respond.
Go for it.
Ashley manages a pot of money for our open space fund. So basically that's doing some project-based work that a couple things are tied in, but in terms of routine maintenance, the timing of this is really great because in September is when we'll start building the 2024 budget, and that will be able to have some maintenance line items specific to Red Rocks that we haven't had before. So we'll do a little more work teasing out where to, can't go from 0 to 60, let's say. It'll have to be incremental, but just trying to get a foothold in that funding, which was, the intent in trying to get some numbers to some of the tiers, just to, at least illuminate to council I don't know that I'll put the full package number in because sometimes that's alarming, but definitely, we can put higher to moderate and just say, this is really what it's going to take to provide an adequate, funding mechanism. So that'll be definitely new, I think, for the city council, and we'll see where we land with budgets, but it's definitely the roadmap to more sustained funding for general maintenance. So we're hoping that those kind of tie together.
That seems great. A week or two ago, Larry and Lisa and I were talking among ourselves, and we were wondering if Red Rocks has any sort of like conservation easement or permanent protection plan in place.
No, but the closest thing that Red Rocks has is it was purchased with Land and Water Conservation Fund money. So the stipulations associated with those projects are it can't be used for other purposes outside of what is in the agreement with this, I guess it's the state. And so, yeah, we really can't do anything else with that land other than keep it as it is for recreation. Recreation being the most active use at the park.
Catherine, that's a question I've asked many times because when I have a nightmare, it has to do with development happening in Red Rocks.
It
I
sounds
keep
like
being
Ashley
assured
might be
it
able to
can't.
ease your nightmare a little bit.
Ashley, I do wonder though, to Catherine's point, do we have that historical document referenced in the management plan?
I feel like I put it in there, but maybe
I feel like we did too, but maybe just a note for you and I to just double check that.
Because I know that when I was doing the project work, I found the original Land and Water Conservation Fund like document with the state. So it is a thing that exists. I'll look into that.
Yeah, and for folks who aren't familiar with that, so Lisa, just so you can get a good night's sleep, they're pretty serious about that, and they do, inspections on a pretty regular basis. So it's not abnormal for us to get a call that someone's coming to take a look at stuff. And certainly if we have, like in discussions about the bathhouse and like that really being in desperate repair, we can do an upgrade. We can even do a replacement as long as the functionality and footprint are pretty much the same. They're really looking for maintaining the intent of what the land was purchased for.
City Center Park is another good example, actually, because City Center Park was purchased with Land and Water Conservation funds. And so when we were planning that park, I did a site visit with the state representative who oversees that program. So yeah, just to add to that. Sorry, Larry, go for it.
So I was going to say that we've always heard the notion that a tree falls in Red Rocks, it can't be removed. It has to stay in place. Is that one of the conditions that you understand from that funding? I was wondered about from a forest management point of view.
I heard it was a city ordinance.
No. So it's not. It's not, and it's not one of the Land and Water Conservation Fund metrics. So that actually is something that was a recommendation in the original management plan, that we should leave trees that fall as they are. And I think that is what city staff have been doing for the most part, not every single time, but for the most part. Yeah, so that came from the original management plan.
And I would say, Ashley, correct me if I'm wrong, but the current management plan would still encourage that, but does leave a little wiggle room for something kind of like extreme, like, an extreme situation where we'd have a cluster of fallen trees or something. It leaves a little bit of flexibility.
Yeah, and I'll just go to, so Ethan Tapper assisted us in considering, and talking about the forest health section of the plan. And when I walked the woods with him, even he was like he was relaying to me that he didn't feel that the woods really needed, you know, that we didn't need to open up any gaps, for example, that it was doing okay, but he was even thinking it was a great place for a possible like educational timber harvest, where working with the community and sharing, you know, how to do a timber harvest the right way and why those can be valuable to forest communities. So that was his only comment when I first walked the site with him, was that it might be a good opportunity for that kind of a thing. But yeah, and that would come with, you know, as I believe it's noted a few times in the tiered management approach, there are a few spots where the woods, if the recommendation is to do a forest management plan, that hopefully we would work in concert with someone like Ethan. He was recommending a consultant, but I'm sure Ethan would be willing and able to help us out in going through that process if that's the path we chose.
I think we have to be careful because there's been a history of people trying to take wood out of there to use at their home, people trying to take out loads of rock out of there. Lord knows what's walked out of there for wildflowers that I haven't caught. And I do tell people there's a city ordinance, they can't take stuff out of because that the woods would walk away and go to people's homes.
And that still is the case, right, Ashley? I mean, you know, no one's allowed to just go in there and start taking stuff, even if it's down. That still remains the case.
Yeah, that is in the ordinance in terms of like removing things from the park. And that, you know, Lisa, what we could do, and I'm not recalling the fabulous new wayfinding signage that Larry referenced earlier, but I know one of the things we did at City Center Park, and if we haven't done it at Red Rock, something we could consider in the future is including language that really talks about the leave no trace ethic, which the leave no trace ethic hits on that, leave things where they are so somebody else can also enjoy them when they come to visit. So it's just trying to perpetuate that idea of foster that culture of you know, leaving no trace and when you're visiting the woods. So anyways, that's something that we could look at as we do our management, you know, go through and do our management updates and evaluations and what our signage needs and that kind of thing. So
Yeah, it might be good, but I love the new wave finding signs that are out there. I thought they look really good. They're nice. They fit in nicely. Yeah.
Just a quick note on Trillium. Interestingly, I get Horsford's email messages, and they're offering Trillium and one other wallflower as cultivated ornamental flowers now. So
Yeah, the cultivated have been around for a while, as
you
well
don't
as
have to
lady
dig them
slippers.
out of the woods, right?
Huh?
You don't have to
Larry?
dig them out of the woods anymore. You can go to Horsford's and get them.
Yeah, but sometimes people aren't always careful because we've got like Dutchman's britches and everything out there, and people step in them, and they're, you know, dogs running around. It does disrupt them.
are there any other questions or comments?
I have something that's slightly off topic, but relates to Red Rocks, but I can wait if it's not time for that yet.
I mean, I think we're kind of nearing the end of the conversation, Drew, so go for it.
I just was wondering what some of the folks in this meeting thought of the recent right-of-way permits that are trying to be approved for the railroad to basically blanket glyphosate on either side of the tracks. I think 12 to 20 something feet on either side of the tracks. I know, you know, it goes right by Red Rocks, their drinking water sources right there. You know, do you guys perceive this as a threat that we should, you know, either as committees or towns or whatever? Because I've already sent my individual environmentalist email in, but I didn't know. I was just wondering if there was anything any of our committees could do to raise awareness around this and try to protect our water source in our natural areas from glyphosate.
Well, I guess what I'll just say is I think it's a great topic for you guys to discuss at your next committee meeting, since I think that herbicide and pesticide use will be one of those topics that you guys talk about for sure. So that might be worth having that conversation as part of that. That'd be my suggestion.
Thanks, Ashley.
Mhm. Does anybody else have any other thoughts or comments or feedback? Awesome.
Should I mention that I had sent in with my notes on the change, that I had talked to Ethan, and I was very thrilled to hear when he mentioned that on the other side of the parking lots, we actually have an old growth forest that has not been tampered with.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fun to share, Lisa.
Yeah,
No,
it was
Ethan's a great
interesting
resource.
talking to him.
Ethan's a great resource, and if you haven't met Ethan Tapper, I do recommend at least connecting with him. He has a lot of great information to share. If you want to chat with him about management of anything, he is actually doing our April community hike. It will also, Drew's is coming up this weekend at Wheeler. His will also be April 9th at Wheeler, so you can kind of get two different perspectives of our property at Wheeler. But yeah, Ethan's a great resource, and yeah, I don't know. I enjoy his conversation. So
Yeah.
All right. I think the only other thing I wanted to add was it would be great, I think, at the next committee, and Holly, correct me if you don't agree with this, but at your next committee meetings, if the committees could just consider, some kind of, I don't know if it needs to be a resolution, but something to like a vote of support of adoption of this plan. I think that would be helpful in terms of finalizing this work and kind of moving on. So how does that sound, Holly, to you?
It sounds good. I don't know that a resolution is necessary. My recommendation would be to just do a voted memo of approval because it's a little less formal. And then you can just address it to you, Ashley, as kind of the lead of the project. And then that just allows us to present to council in a package, right? So we would include the PowerPoint presentation, the two documents that are linked, and then, if the committees were to forward, two memos of support. And that just cleans it up, I think, for city council to know that it's been vetted through the two committees, as well as, staff and a little broader creation. I think that's the next step.
All right. Does anybody else have anything to add before I think we can probably adjourn for the evening?
I just had a
No?
quick question. Is city council going to vote to approve the plan?
Our plan wasn't, other places that I've looked at, theirs hasn't been supported by council. Council didn't support the last couple of management plans. I think council is interested that we have one, and I think they want to be updated, but that's the extent that we're expecting them to get involved with this process. It's going to be a plan that essentially Holly is going to be the master of. I mean, she may not implement it, but she's going to be the holder of it in her department. So I think it was important for us to make sure that we had as much public input and as much committee support to make this kind of the official word for the park. So yeah.
I think, Catherine, if there was any language that we might suggest, it would be a request to accept it. Maybe not to approve it, but just to accept it. Just, so that can be just a point of clarification that it's been presented, it's been vetted through the committees that they've chosen, and that they're accepting it.
All right. Well, again, thank you all for joining us tonight. I will let Larry go back to those kids. But have a great night, everybody, and thank you. And yeah, I'll talk to you all soon.
See some of you guys next week.
Bye-bye.
Yes, next week.